Hello, how are you? Hope you're all tuning in. Yes, there again on the apex rising and the on the horizon of the dancehall energy. That's what I'm going to call it. We're on the horizon of it. We're seeing a lot of energy being pumped into the dancehall musical scene, and I'm enjoying it. I hope you all enjoying it as well, and I hope you're enjoying the series that I'm bringing to you, talking about the 90s at the moment. Was talking about the MCs, the sound systems, and we even talked about some of the producers and what the producers and the MCs brought to the sound system was the label power, the power of the labels. We have to talk about this because it's very important, and it was very important back then. And we have to mention the big labels of that time: Island Records, Tough Gong, major players in the music industry at the moment. Atlantic, CBS, Sony, they all were vying for the artist in the 90s. Tiger was one of the early artists I remember being looked at from the dancehall scenes, and also Yellowman, who can forget Yellowman, king of the MCs, king of dancehall music. There was also other artists who we looked up to: Josie Wales, Brigadier Jerry, Charlie Chaplin. These were very prominent artists, Ranking Dread, Mikey Dread. Trying to think of some of the other artists that we don't always mention now, but when we look back over the years, Ijaman Levi was another artist that was played all the time, alongside Gregory Isaac, of course, who was the ladies' favourite. But Ijaman Levi gave us some very memorable songs. We had a lot of female artists, a lot of female MCs, Sister Nancy being one, Lady G, another artist we'll mention. And the labels that bought them out were some of the greatest labels that you can think about if you look at how music has now changed and how it's been affected and been influenced by the dancehall scene of the 1990s. We had jungle music that came out after the 90s, and we had acid music that was mentioned even by Tip Irie, mentioned a song that had acid in its title. So this gives you some timeline of what the labels were doing and what the artists were looking at and what the influences of the music. Fashion Label, which was an English label, did a lot of great songs. Great lovers rock era came out of that label. Greensleeves was another label that has to be mentioned in the archives of music. We also have to mention Taxi, whose producers, musicians were, of course, Sly and Robbie, great legends in the music industry who brought out some of the best music of the 70s and of the 80s and of the 90s and even to the 2000s. We see Taxi is still one of the major labels, and Sly and Robbie, who I must send my respects to both of these producers and artists, were one of the greatest, if not the greatest. And I say that with sort of knowledge of what they did, their body of work. I'm not going to take away what any other producers did in the industry. We also had Lee Scratch Perry, who I put up in a great high esteem, and Sly and Robbie, I put them in that same category. So I'm going to mention Sly and Robbie in the fact that the artists that they worked with, the body of work that they brought out, the influence that they have on music in the dancehall scene, and before that in the roots rockers scene, the dub scene. You will find some element of Taxi Gang in their early formative years. They worked with groups like Black Uhuru, who we all know now, and we know their songs, and that was majorly down to the production skills and engineering skills and musical skills and knowledge and charisma of the Taxi Gang crew, Sly and Robbie. So I'm mentioning the labels and putting them in high esteem in this particular program. And I hope that this continues with other vloggers looking at how the labels created the energy that we have now in dancehall, because the sound systems were only there playing their part in it, and the producers and the labels, what they had over the sound systems were that they were bringing the songs out. They had the knowledge of the older songs from the Studio One, from the Techniques label, from the Cox and Dodd label, and they were then reinventing them both in the 70s and in the 80s, and then back into the 90s. And then the 90s was, as we classed it in some of our promotions, as being the golden era of the music, of the dancehall music. But dancehall music started way before then. In the 50s, they were doing dance halls. And so the name continued. Shubin, blues, these were all names that came from the 50s, then carried on into the 70s, the 60s. They continued with this name. And so the name dancehall music is based on the arenas it was played in. So dancehall music was originally for sound systems to play. It could be outside and it could be inside, but it was still the same type of music: high energy, high performance, social commentary, love songs, cultural awareness. These were all the formulas that were used to create the music by the producers. That's why I said you have to hold the producers and the labels in high esteem. And there's more producers out there that I'm going to mention in the up and coming episodes, and I'm going to mention some of the iconic songs that some of the artists did, and some of the iconic rhythms like Real Rock, Starlight. These are iconic rhythms now to this day. Panani rhythm track, and you might know it as something else, but originally that was what it was known as. But it came from the original Babylon Books. And when you look back over music from the 80s, you hear how dancehall music was being formulated, from the slangtang rhythm track to, as I said, the real rock, to Love Bump rhythm track. These are all originally Studio One tracks that were being reformulated in the 80s. Frankie Paul did a lot of versions on some old Studio One tracks, so did Gregory. And when you listen back to some of these songs, you hear the original drum patterns, you hear the bass lines that they continued into the 70s and into the 2000s. The 2000s was when we had labels like Exterminator label, we had Live and Love label. Coming before that, we had Powerhouse label, we had Bobby Digital label, Jammy's label, Black Scorpio label. So many labels. Even Stone Love, the sound system, had their own label. So all sound systems then looked to build their own label. Saxon did the same thing. Coxon, another UK band, not to be mistaken from Cox and Dodd in Jamaica, but they were still linked in the way that they played music from the using the old formulas. And there were other labels that you have to give them their props: Black Wax, Hummingbird, Blue Beat, as I mentioned, Studio One, which is where a lot of the foundation music we listen to now came from. Groups like the Heptones, the Paragons, Slim Smith. Some of these artists from back then are still being played now. Tyrone Taylor, Rudy Thomas. We have to pay respect to all of these artists and the MCs and the producers all in one. And we're going to try to do the utmost as we do our research, play through songs, reminisce, and bring back some of the old favorites, and definitely salute all our legends from back then. Hopefully, I can mention more people as this series goes on. I'm going to try to mention all of the artists who had some influence on myself growing up. So, adios.